Hey guys, Mikosh here. Today we're going to be talking about the low-end Magic Find character for the Tornado Shot build. I know I am late, please don't attack me in the comments. So the first question we're going to ask ourselves when making this low-end Magic Find character is it even worth it to have Magic Find on a low-end budget? The short answer is absolutely not. However, this is a video game and we are here to have fun, so even if it's not worth it, we are still going to add Magic Find into our build, but we're going to do it carefully. The first thing is to understand what really Magic Find does. The first misconception is, especially for item quantity, is when players see 100% increased item quantity, they believe their build will have 100% more items, so basically doubling the items. That is not correct. If you look at on the right side of the screen, at 100% item quantity, you actually receive only 56% more items. Why is that? Well, it's because there's something called diminishing returns with item quantity. The first 10% you add to your build when you're at 0% IIQ or increased item quantity, you receive 8.45% more. If you're at 100% already and you add an additional 10%, you only receive 1.99% more, effectively 4 times worse than the first time you added increased item quantity. This means for players who scale all the way up to 100%, they will have to sacrifice a lot of resources to be able to reach that 100%, and it is sometimes not worth it. The math with item rarity, however, is not really known. However, when you increase your item quantity, inherently, usually your item rarity will increase as well, so you don't really have to break your head for that. Now, the goal of people that play Magic Find is going to be to drop better loot. The real way to drop better loot is in order to do harder content, to do the harder content quicker, and then once you have the harder content and it is done quickly, you can then add Magic Find to your build. However, Magic Find is known as a build killer and a quite big new trap. Why? Because no build when you add Magic Find will be as equally strong or stronger than before. It makes your build slower, it makes your DPS worse, and it makes your survivability considerably lowered. So then how to cater to harder content to be faster and to still have Magic Find without having to completely kill your build? The solution on a low budget is going hybrid. We're not going to try to achieve that 100% like those 20 mirror builds. We're going to stop ourselves at maybe 40, 50, or 60%. If we take the example at 50%, you have 35% more item. If you had to have twice the amount of Magic Find, you'd be, yes, at 56%. However, it will be considerably harder to go from 50% to 100% quantity than going from 0% to 50 quantity, which is quite easy. So then what are we going to prioritize when making our build or getting our build done? The first thing that you want is getting a good amount of DPS. You want a nice elemental DPS bow. I suggest a minimum of 1.2 thousand, so 1,200. You could at 1,000, however, this league, unless you're doing the tier 7 kind of strat, I suggest even more than 1.2 because they are very tanky. However, at 1.2, you are able to clear 3,000 with tier 16 maps with this build. You want a nice quiver with a lot of projectile speed, crit multi, and flat damage. The second thing we're going to prioritize is going to be good defense. This build is, this league is extremely rippy. The monsters are completely bonkers, and because they are very tanky as well, we often don't have enough DPS to kill them before they even hit you. So we're going to have to start layering a bit more defense than usual. Then we're going to get more movement speed. That will come inherently with the Rage Tech, Rampage, and all of our Flask effect in our build. Finally, we're going to be adding Magic Find slowly. We're going to add the ring, the helmet, the flask, and the boots. So now in this section, I'm going to be explaining the techs that I'm using in the build. If you understand all of them, you can completely skip to the build section. However, I do suggest you watch this part. The first thing we're going to be adding is one of our rings is going to be the Death Rush ring instead of the Venter's Gamble. Why Death Rush? First of all, it gives us chaos resistance, which is quite important for survivability. It gives us life recovery on kill, and considering we're a mapper, we are doing a lot of kills every second, which means we can easily get back to our full HP just by shooting our tornado shot 2 or 3 times on enemies because they're going to die. And finally, and most importantly, we gain adrenaline for in between 1 to 3 seconds on kill. What is adrenaline? It's a buff that increases your damage by 100%. It has a 25% increased movement, attack, and cast speed buff, as well as a 10% physical damage reduction. So it is completely broken. It does a ton of DPS, makes you a lot quicker, and attacks quicker. The second tech we are adding into our build is going to be the Warlord's Berserk Manaforge setup. Berserk is the strongest buff in the game, and for those who don't know, at level 20, it ends up being 44% more damage, 19% less damage taken, and a whopping 30% more movement speed. What's really cool about more is that more doesn't work with increases. More is an addition, it's additional, while increases are multiplicative. What do I mean by that is your increases, they'll add up to each other and then multiply. However, the more will have all of your basic damage or movement speed or whatever. It is then multiplied by all your increases, and in the end, it takes all of that and it adds the percentage on top. So it's completely broken, and yeah, it's very rare to have more in anything. So Berserk is very powerful. However, to fuel Berserk, you're not going to need mana. You're going to need something called Rage. And the thing is, Deadeye can't really generate Rage just by themselves. Well, they cannot actually generate Rage. So our Rage regeneration is going to be the Warlord's Mark, which is a curse that grants you 20 Rage over 1 second when you stun a cursed enemy. We're going to be using the Focal Point Ascendancy, which increases our mark effect by 75%. So in the end, every time we stun a marked enemy, we gain 35 Rage. Now, how do we stun, and what the hell is a stun? Well, a stun is when you hit an enemy or when you get hit, and the damage is so high, the damage is high enough, and it actually stops you from doing anything. Like, it annuls any movement or skill you were going to do. Stun that has a 20% chance or lower of stunning actually is not counted, but that is not really important for us. What we really want to know is, if we make a hit that is more than 10% of the effective hit pool, we have a chance to stun. And if we make a hit that is 50% more than the effective hit pool, we have 100% chance to stun. There's also a thing called stun threshold, which is like a multiplier of your effective HP. If you have a 50% increased stun threshold, that means that 10% actually needs to be 15%, right? Well, it's not really that. It's 10%. However, it's going to calculate the effective HP with 1.5 multiplier, so 50% increase. Or if you have a reduced stun threshold, that means it's going to be easier to stun. The second thing that is very important about stunning is you cannot stun when enemies are frozen. And because we're a triple elemental build, we have a chance of freezing. And when we crit, we have a 100% chance to freeze when we deal cold damage, which means we wouldn't be able to stun. Now, freeze is a very good defensive layer in our build because when we freeze, enemies can attack you. So not being able to freeze is a loss for us. However, by using the Secrets of Suffering Keystone, we lose the ability to freeze, but we gain other benefits that are way better. Those benefits are Scorch, Brittle, and Sap, and we will deal that to enemies whenever we critical strike. Brittle will increase critical strike chance against enemy up to 6% flat, which is, by the way, nearly 4 times stronger than Watcher's Eye with Hatred with 1.8%, which can fetch for maybe hundreds and hundreds of Divine, and this Keystone is, well, 80 Chaos. It can also give Scorch, which lowers the resistance of enemies or the person who has Scorch, and it can also Sap, which means if you are sapped or if the enemies are sapped, it deals less damage, which means inherently you are tankier. Another very interesting tech we are using in the build is going to be the +5 arrow tech. Tornado Shot is a skill that scales a lot with additional projectile. However, the gear reflects that and is a lot more expensive whenever there's additional projectile. Your bow, for example, can cost you 5 to 6 divines at a certain amount of elemental damage. Now, if you add +2 projectile, it might quadruple, quintuple, or even multiply the price by tenfold. The thing is, on a low budget, we don't have enough currency. So this tech is going to help us literally double the amount of projectiles we have. So the first step is going to be going for the Warden of the Magi Ascendancy, which is the best option for us on a low budget. We're going to use the Dying Sun Ruby Flask, which grants you +2 projectile. However, that scales with Flask Effect. This means if we have 50% Flask Effect, we gain an additional projectile. And we're going to do so by using the Micro Distillery Belt, where you have a 30% Flask Effect. However, you can't use a flask in the 5th slot. The thing is, because we're Warden of the Magi, we're going to put a tincture in that 5th slot, which means we're not losing anything and getting only the benefits from the micro distillery. Thanks to one of the ascendancy point of the Warden of the Magi, which is Nature's Concoction, flask adjacent to applied tinctures have a 30% increased effect when used if you've hit an enemy with a weapon recently. That's a total of 60%, which means we are above the 50% minimum, so we receive plus 3 arrows thanks to Dying Sun. The missing 2 projectiles is going to be thanks to a tincture where it grants weapon attacks fire 1 or 2, we're going to go for the 2, additional projectile if you've been hit recently. The thing is, to get that plus 2, well, you need to have been hit recently. This means when you're mapping, you're not going to stop and then let enemies hit you. That's dangerous and it's going to slow you down. The thing is, the tincture doesn't specify if it's hit by you or hit by an enemy. This means we will actually self-hit ourselves to be able to proc consistently and 100% uptime for this tincture. In our Mana Forged Cast on Crit Warlord setup, we're going to be using the Transfigured Gem of Forbidden Rite, which is the Forbidden Rite Soul of Sacrifice. And the reason you want the Transfigured version is because it scales the damage off your energy shield, which we don't have a lot, instead of your life. Because if you went for the normal Forbidden Rite, you might actually just end up killing yourself because your chaos resistance is not high enough or you have too much HP. And you can also keep this gem at very low level. I think level 1 is just fine. And it's any amount of damage, right? If you get hit by 1 damage, you will proc this tincture. So low level deals pretty much no damage. It's the 6th link in our Warlord setup. And you just get plus 2 arrows for, well, basically free. Now to get on to our defensive layers, the first combo we're going to be using is going to be the Bloodnotch combo, which is a known jewel combo where we completely abuse the immutable force, Bloodnotch, and an energy shield mastery. So Bloodnotch, what it does is 40 to 60% of the damage taken from stunning hits is recovered as life. This means if we get stunned, 40 to 60%, we just gain that life back. Now the thing is, as we said, stun needs to hit you hard. We're going to be using an energy shield mastery that says the stun threshold is based on 60% of your energy shield instead of life. Some don't even have energy shield, and when you're playing, you know, a tornado shot, you might have, what, 30, 40 energy shield, and then it's a 60% of that. So your stun threshold is based on 20 HP, basically, or 20 energy shield. This means every single hit you receive will be counted as stun, and you will recover your life, well, a high percentage of that life. The thing is, when you're stunned, you stop moving, and if you stop moving, well, you can't do anything. So to palliate to that, we're going to be using the immutable force, which has between 500 to 1000% increased stun and block recovery. We're going to try to go for a 900%, which fetches for, I think, a divine, so it's not really expensive. This means you are 10 times quicker at recovering, so it's basically instant. The moment you're stunned, you instantly recover, and you don't even, when you're playing, you're not even going to know that you've been stunned. And it is completely broken, and all of that synergizes with Petrified Blood. And if you have the budget, but it's not because Progenesis is too expensive, and it's more expensive than this whole build. But if you do have Progenesis, it also works very well with all of that. Another layer of defense is going to be the Defiance of Destiny. Defiance of Destiny is a unique amulet which gains a certain percentage of your missing unreserved life before being hit by an enemy. That your recovery, I don't understand. If you don't really understand what that means, just think about you can't really die from small hits. As long as a hit is not one-shotting you, you cannot die. Multiple enemies can hit you. You can be hit 10,000 times in a second. As long as those 10,000 hits aren't a one-shot, you cannot die. Let's take an example. At 5,000 HP, if you're at full HP and you get hit, Defiance of Destiny does nothing because you don't have unreserved missing life. However, let's say you're at 1 HP on 5,000 and the roll on Defiance of Destiny is at 35%, which is the max roll. When you get hit, you have only 1 HP, you gain 35% of your missing life, which is 1,749, and then it will give you that HP, so you go up to 1,750 life before getting hit. It is completely broken. I'm going to put an example in the screen showing how completely stupid it is paired with the Bloodnotch combo. Alright, so for the build section, I'm going to do that in-game because this is a low-end build. It's not really that complicated. Let's first talk about our weapon. If you can, well, obviously, get a 6-link with the elemental DPS bow. This one is sitting, I think, at 1,100 or 1,200, roundabout. If you craft that yourself, it's literally going to cost nothing. If you decide to buy it, I think right now it probably is for 8-9 divines, max 10 divines, without any additional arrows. This quiver is a basic quiver with projectile speed, damage, life, elemental damage. You can probably get that for less than a divine. Our amulet is the Defiance of Destiny, which is very basic, with the sovereignty allocated because our mana reservation is going to be very tight in the build. Then we're going to get a Venter's Gamble with positive resistance, positive item quantity and rarity, and a bit of HP. A ring like that could probably fetch for maybe through 2 divine. I think I bought that one for exactly 2 divine without any quality on it. If you want a quality, it might cost you an additional 2 or 3 divines, but it will grant you an extra maybe 10% increase resistance. Our other ring is going to be the Death Rush ring, obviously, for adrenaline and life recovery. Our chest is going to be Harry's Ire. It is very cheap, very common. You don't need the +1 socket gem corruption. It is completely unnecessary. It is very good because it gives you a lot of flat evasion rating, which is very useful for our, for our evasion, obviously. And it also grants you a lot of flat added cold damage, as well as 30% chance to suppress spell damage. Our gloves are going to be Shadows and Dust. They grant you a global critical strike chance, critical strike multiplier, leech for physical hit, and as well as Rampage, which is a completely broken buff. I think it's 1% increased damage per 20 and then 1% increased movement speed per 50, and you can easily go in the 500, 600, even thousands. Well, the limit is 1000, but yeah, it's very easy when you're running through maps. You're going to see the number on the left side of your screen. It's also going to grant you kind of like kill streaks whenever you hit like a number of kills, and those kill streaks are very powerful. They can even clear a whole screen for you. Our boots are going to be the Gold Worm boots. Try to go for the 20% item quantity and spell suppress. This could probably cost you maybe 2 divines, I think, on a low roll of suppression. Your belt is going to be the Micro Distillery. Just get life, the resistance needed, chaos resistance, flask effect if you can. I know also you can also have the Alchemy's Genius, which is quite good because it grants you even more flask effect. Our helmet. This one specifically, if you decide to buy it, it's probably going to cost you maybe 20 divines. However, you can craft this for nothing. The base increased rarity fractured even at tier 1 on a not high roll, so not max roll at 24, is for 20 chaos. Then all you have to do is spam the mana reservation efficiency, the essence for that, until you hit increased rarity. You're going to craft the increased rarity of item drops slain by rare uniques, and then you're just going to Eldritch craft your prefix for the max life, and that's it. I didn't even finish crafting this thing, and it's probably going to cost you, what, 5 divines? If you went for intelligence as well, it might cost you maybe 10, but it's really, really easy to make. For my flask, you want Divination Distillate. What's really cool about Divination Distillate is it's a life and mana flask, right? Which means when you're using Petrified Blood, which stops all of your life recovery above 50%, well, this one will continue going up. And the thing is, it doesn't do it very quickly, which means when you're attacking and your Mana Forge is proccing and you have above 50% HP, you will never stop having the Divination Distillate buff. If we took the example of being max HP, you can't even use Divination Distillate. So that's another reason why we use Petrified Blood, is you're able to use Divination Distillate and the whole flask effect is not going to bring you at max HP. The second one is going to be the Diamond Flask. It could be replaced by Onslaught, the Silver Flask. However, I think a higher crit chance, especially for our Mana Forge setup, is going to be important to consistently proc the Forbidden Rite and Frenzy of Onslaught with the cast on crit for the Warlord's Mark. We're going to have the Quicksilver Flask because obviously without Flask we're a bit slow. Now if you add the Quicksilver Flask we're going a bit quicker, and then with the Berserk buff and our Rampage kill, I'm telling you, you're going 300% increased movement speed. You are zooming through the map. We're going to go with the Dying Sun. The Dying Sun must be on the 4th Flask slot or else it won't benefit from the Tincture. And then on the 5th Flask, just make sure your Tincture is always on. I always forget to put it on, which reduces... Well, you lose basically 3 projectile because it's +2 here, and then 1 from the Dying Sun because the Tincture is not active. For the gems, it's very simple. Forbidden Rite, Soul of Sacrifice, Frenzy of Onslaught, which grants you Frenzy and Onslaught. Mana Forge setup, Warlord's Mark, cast on crit, life tap support. Life tap will make that you always proc your Frenzy whenever you attack, as you can see on the screen on the bottom right. If you didn't have it, well, first of all, you'd have severe mana issues, and it wouldn't be proccing often. The goal of this setup, as you can see here, whenever I'm shooting my Tornado Shot, it shoots Frenzy, the green arrows. Frenzy, when it hits an enemy, if it crits, it's going to cast, thanks to cast on crit, and it's going to cast Warlord's Mark, and it's going to cast Forbidden Rite at the same time. So here in the hideout, you will never see them proc, but whenever that Frenzy hits an enemy and it crits, you will see them proc. Now there's been a lot of people telling me, hey, what if I use the Tincture stun enemies on full life? Well, because you need Warlord's Mark to be procced on the enemy, to then stun them and then gain the rage, the first hit is going to be used to apply Warlord's Mark. So even if you had the Tincture stun enemies on full life, it will not actually grant you rage, which is basically a useless Tincture. For our auras, we are running Grace for survivability, and Enlighten level 3s, which are, I think, a few divs. Anger for basic damage, so you're able to get Trinity. I'm not even level 20, but try to get all of them level 20, of course. The rest is going to be Petrified Blood, Enlighten level 3, Berserk, and Purity of Elements. Actually, it's a small mistake I've made, but try to get the most amount of auras on your Shadow and Dust with the +1 level of Socketed Gems, because it will make your Enlighten be a higher level. As you can see, it's a 88% here, and over here it's a 92%. So, you know, you might tell yourself it's not a lot, but in the end, it's going to decide whether or not you're able to actually run your auras or not. In my boots, I have Arrogant Support with Precision, which takes literally up nothing, and anyways, we can't go above 50%, so we don't need more mana reservation efficiency, and I have Flame Dash right over here. For the main link, I have Inspiration Support for mana issues with Tornado Shot. When I have my Flask with the reduced mana cost, it only causes 2 mana, so I'm never going to have mana issues, and I also gain mana on hit. Trinity Support, I'm only level 5, but get them level 20, please. Very strong, it is the most powerful elemental supporting gem. Fork Support is the best for mapping, it is better than Chain. Mirage Archer, very good because, well, it's a 100% damage uptime. When we're clicking on things, we're not shooting, but Mirage Archer will help us for that. Elemental damage with attacks, and Tornado Shot, obviously all level 20 and 20 quality, especially on that Tornado Shot for the additional secondary projectile. So that's about the gear. Let's talk about the tree. The tree is very interesting. This tree might not be the most min-maxed, so I will have a POB coming, well, once you watch the video. Here I have mana reservation efficiency, mana effect. I go for projectile speed, damage, life. Here is movement speed, suppression, more life. Get the maximum life here. Here I have Lethal Pride. The reason I have Lethal Pride is because we need attributes, right? Without Lethal Pride, well, we can't run any of our gear. So quite important to have Lethal Pride. You don't really care about, you know, the other benefits of Lethal Pride. It's too expensive if you had to aim for that. So just a random Lethal Pride. Here we have additional accuracy, critical strike chance, suppression, additional projectile over here, hits, you know, elemental penetration, elemental reversion. Here I have intelligence because we're going to be missing a lot of intelligence, and I did not hit any intelligence on my helmet, sadly. Our bow wheel is going to be quite simple. We want critical strike chance, additional arrow. We want increases and reductions to projectile speed also apply with damage with bows. That is quite a chunky amount of damage. Here is more crit chance, more projectile speed, increased damage at longer distance, more HP. Get the 15% increased maximum life if there is no life modifiers on equipped body armor because we don't have life on our chest. And here I went for, it could be a 2 passive skill, but just get a, and we don't care about the rolls. I have introspection, we don't care about. Just get, it could even be a magic one. Just get one with the 6% mana reservation efficiency because without it, you can't roll all of your auras. And just put a single point, you don't need more. For our cluster, we go for the classic Martial Prowess, Feed the Fury, and Fuel the Fight. Martial Prowess for attack damage, accuracy rating. Here we want Feed the Fury for increased damage while leeching, and Mana Leech and Life Leech. What's really cool about Leech is when you are at 100% HP, when you leech, it stops, right? So all of that increased damage while leeching doesn't work. But when you're using Petrified Blood, you overleech, so you will never stop leeching even if you block at 50%, which means you can use 100% of the power of Fuel the Fight and Feed the Fury. Then my setup, I go up here, I gain life and 2 mana, because sometimes you're running maps that tell you that you can't regenerate life or mana, so no choice. More life recovery on kill. Here you could replace this setup for a Inspired Learning and take off the Bloodnotch and Immutable Force combo if you wanted. I think it's not really useful because we're zooming so fast and we have so many buffs coming on with it that going for the Bloodnotch and Immutable Force is worth it, but it ends up being a preference. I'm gonna go back to the cluster, sorry. We go eye to eye and repeater. Don't go for the pressure point and quick getaway because with Brittle, even though you don't see it in game or in PoB, with Brittle, you're basically gonna be crit capped very instantly. And finally, you get the Secrets of Suffering to be able to consistently proc your stuns and get all of that good buffs. Finally, we're gonna go up here. I know it's a bit of points, but if you go for the Inspired Learning, you can drop this one, Energy Shield Mastery. This one is specifically for the Bloodnotch combo, where your stun threshold is based on 60%. If you didn't use the Bloodnotch combo, you would take off these points, put the Inspired Learning right over here, and then you would add another large cluster with the same Feed the Fury, Marsh, all of that. Add medium clusters, and then add your mana reservation efficiency and other, jewels needed. Don't forget, try to get Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you. I think I have it on my Secrets of Suffering. No, I have it somewhere. I don't know where I have it, but you should have it 100% or else your HP is going to melt like crazy. So that is basically the build. Hopefully you enjoyed, and if you have any questions, you can always ask me in the comments or join the Discord. We are 6,500 in there. We have a bunch of helpers that are on all the time, and you can also join me on Discord. Talk to me on Discord. I'm often chilling in there. So good luck with your build, and let me know how it goes. Peace.